work anymore. That's a function of phase cancellation. And it's also a situation where, in most cases, you're not using your stereo field very well. So how many people have listened to a song and realized that there are certain instruments only on one side and only on the other? Just in listening. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Some friends of mine have a group that, guys, young, but you might know who they are, Radiohead. And when we were young, starting out, I didn't know them at the time. I was not going to meet them for another 8 years. But the thing that made them different than every other group in pop music, even though not really pop yet, is that their music sounded as good as the Beatles. We hadn't really, Pink Floyd, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cats who were really good at the psychedelic era, but no one continuously put out music sonically that was superior. Radiohead hits the market, and the whole game changes. And what they did was, they went back to the basic principles of using the full stereo field. So, in most cases, let's go instrument by instrument, because when we get into the example, you're going to see how we're going to make this real for you. Where do you hear okay, you've got two speakers, right? So you've got a sense of left, right, and center. Where do you hear the kick drum on the drum in relation to that? Left, right, or center? Center. Kick drum. Where do you hear the snare? Right. Sometimes, but in most cases, center. And it's an energy thing. That's why you do it in the center. You want it to really snap really hard, you put it in the center. There's the snare. Where do you normally hear the bass? Think about it. Your bass. Doom, 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 doom. Low right. Nope, the center. And remember your answer, because I want you just to, next time you put on some headphones, listen to a song and think about this. Here's the other trick. While you're listening to your favorite song, especially if you grab the Beatles or Radiohead, take one ear out and leave the other one in and listen to it for the entire song. Make sure it's a song you know well. Then pull this ear out, put this ear in, and listen to the entire song. The first thing that's going to kill you is you're going to realize that some things only happen in these far extremes. The reason is that when you take sound and stack it on top of one another, meaning it's all to the left or all to the right or all to the center, and they're in the same frequency range, they are going to phase cancel to some degree. Do you guys know what phase cancellation is when I talk about that? That is the phenomenon where you have two sounds that are the same, and because of their frequency range and energy, when they set on top of one another, they begin to sound really distant and really far back in the background, and you almost can't really hear them when you put them together. So the phase cancellation is what makes a certain sound in relation to another cause the problem of it sounding muddy and it sounding inarticulate. The minute I do that, let's say it's two guitars, and one guitar is strumming one strum pattern, the other guy's strumming another pattern, but they're in the same chord range, it's going to sound like mud. But there's a trick. The trick is using the full stereo field. Left, right. What would I do? I would take, if the guitars are here and they're stacked, what am I going to do in order to be able to hear them both really clear? I'm going to throw them out all the way left and right. The energy for the guitar now is only going out of this left speaker for guitar 1. For guitar 2, the energy for that guitar is only happening in the right speaker. Now, when we use this example, I'm going to show you how that works. It's night and day what you hear, okay? So, if you also notice, oftentimes what you hear in the center is you hear your vocals in the center. Now, can you tell me of any other instrument you can think of where you hear them in the center, left, or right? Can you think of any left or right information that you've heard in songs where you really only hear it over here or over here?
Some other percussion, like example, like hi-hats or like shakers or something.
Yep.
To the left or the right, just a little bit.
Yep.
I mean, they're not directly in the center of the kick drum.
Exactly, because remember, it's a range. What were you gonna say?
I feel like a lot of the time I hear like background vocals panned out wider.
Exactly. And you know why they're doing that? They're vocals. So there's a lead singer, you want that lead singer to be heard. Well, now you're trying to cram 4, 6, 8 voices right down the center. It's gonna phase cancel.
It seems like in like a lot of Radiohead songs, they'll use like these big strings and make it wide and sort of equal so that it sort of envelops the whole thing while they're having the guitars move back and forth. So
Exactly.
That.
Through pan, yeah, that's through panning. Everybody knows what panning is. Turning a little pan knob left and right. That's how we get the information to go where we want it to go. That's really key with a lot of the groups that have used that over time. So let's now take a look quickly at what's on that list. Let's go over our tools. So the other issue that we have is equalization. So you have two guitars that are playing within the same range, they've got the same tone. There's a way to make it so that you can actually hear them both, because let's say you want them both a little bit to the right, maybe one's further to the right than the other, but you need them on the right hand side because you have some keyboard over here in the same range and you want the keyboard over there. You use your EQ to notch out different parts of the frequencies of each guitar, which then let that part that you've notched out be heard louder on the next guitar. Why? Because you're not fighting within that frequency, and I'll show you. So if something is happening here at, let's just call it 1K, 1000 hertz. And this is what the sine wave looks like of guitar 1. This is what the sine wave looks like of guitar 2 because they're out of phase. So they're constantly canceling each other. If I take an EQ and I put that EQ on guitar 2, and I notch out the 1K, literally just notch it out, because this is that frequency that's out of phase. The minute I notch this out, meaning I lower its volume, this sound here gets louder, because there's nothing to fight it in that range. But on guitar 2, I really like the low end of how he's playing, say, a more metalish chord. And then I go down to, let's say, 800 hertz. And I essentially notch out guitar 1 at that frequency. That means guitar 2 is going to sound louder at 800 hertz. And we're going to go over this really quickly. So it sounds like it's over your head, or it's like it's magic. It takes a while to digest it. Don't beat yourself up. If it's not just striking you right now, it will by the time we're done. So that's EQ. The second thing that you're going to be dealing with is what we have on our list. We have pan. We already talked about pan. That's how you move the sound in the stereo field from left to right. The next thing you have is you have 3, which is my favorite tool in the studio, compression. Does anybody know what a compressor does?
Compressors for dynamics control, so you have a threshold, and then once sound passes that threshold, it cuts down the level of the sound passing the threshold by the ratio.
Exactly. Does that make sense to everybody? Or is that kind of hard to understand? Well, here's an example that will help you. This is the sine wave of, let's call it a guitar, right? So what you have is you have amplitude. So you have 0, and then you just come up with a kind of 10. Right? So this is how loud the signal is. And if you'll notice here, I have some peaks that are much louder than the rest of the body of the sound. Does that make sense? By looking at it, you can see this point is really loud, that point is really loud, that point is really loud. In fact, they're hitting 10. They're really too loud. What a compressor is going to do by controlling dynamics is you're going to set the threshold and you're going to tell that sound, you will get no louder than 8 dB. And so you set it at 8 dB, it creates a ceiling. It's a sine wave, so it's got a top and a bottom. And so no matter what side of the cycle it's on, it's going to stop that sound from getting any louder than 8 dB. So what's that going to do to the curve? It's going to look like this now. And all of this goes away. So, somebody's playing an acoustic guitar. It's a really good example. And they strum, kind of hard at certain points. At those moments, it jumps above 10 dB. You get digital distortion, sounds like garbage. Now, all of a sudden, it can't do that. It fits within the range. It no longer clips. And the headroom difference now is smaller. So what happens is, then I say, I cut it 2 dB. So you have a minus 2 dB reduction. Then I go to the gain function on the compressor. And what do I do with that gain function?
Turn that up.
How much?
2 dB.
A minimum of 2 dB. So this is your limit. This is now a plus 2 dB gain in volume. But what really happens is, because we've reduced this, when I raise this level up, this is still going to hold at 8 dB. I'm beginning to squash that signal. And that means that all the quieter information will now be heard, louder than it was before. So the acoustic guitar is strum, 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 strum. Well, now it's strum, 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 strum. It's a very even, controlled performance. The minute I control the performance and its energy, and I've got it in a tight band, all I have to do now to fit it in the mix even better than it ever could have been before is assign it its left, right, and then go into our use our fader to then cut the volume up or down. And all of a sudden, placing sound in your mix gets easier because of this one tool. You can say something worth.
No.
So the compressor to me is the single most important tool in the studio. I can affect the EQ by where I put the microphone on the singer or the instrument. If I wanted to have more or less bass, I can find a spot in the room where there's no standing waves for the low end. Or if I want the high end, I can adjust the amp and roll off the bottom to get more of the high end. I have EQ controls in the space. Reverb, I set the mic off in the corner if I want to catch the reverb of the drums. It's the best reverb you can get if you have a big enough room. So I've got those tools, but the one thing that's very hard to mimic is compression. So that's why it's my favorite tool. And 5 is low. Okay, the next issue we're going to talk about is reverb, and there should be a slash here because there should also be delay. How many of you guys have applied a reverb to your sound? Okay? If you haven't, do it. Don't be afraid of any of these tools. Stretch the limits of the reverb. Turn it up as loud as you can so you hear what it sounds like. It's going to sound like garbage. Sometimes neat effects come out of that garbage zone. But test it. Push it to its limit. Then back it off to a level you like. But reverb makes something sound like it's in a bigger or smaller room. But it's always a room. It's not dry, like as if it's not in a room, or if it's in an enclosed box that's well padded. It sounds like it's in a room. So, John Bonham, anybody listen to Led Zeppelin? Okay, so that you know his infamous drums, where they were at the castle and there are only 2 mics on the drum set. There's a third mic at the end of the hallway. There's kick, there's snare, and there's 1 mic on down the end of the hallway. It's a mono drum track. This is how you get that effect. You get that incredible, what they call slapback sound. It just sounds bigger than life. It's unnatural, right? Okay, so that's reverb. Now, here's what we do with reverb. Reverb is how we create a sense of, if I'm standing here in the middle, we want to create a sense that is either close to us or far away from us. Let's keep it simple like that. With reverb, I can make it appear 5 feet, 10 feet, 30 feet away. Okay? So it's depth. Delay is another tool. Have many of you guys used a delay? Okay? So delay, what you do with delay is, who mentioned something about stereo wiggling radio, so make it big, strange. Usually that's with a delay. A delay can take a mono sample and make it sound like the room is wider. That's the whole function of delay at this point of your understanding. Big. You want to have a sound in the middle, but you want it to sound like it's on both sides, kind of encompassing you. Use a delay. If you want it to sound like it's closer, far away, use a reverb. If you want to really envelop sound around yourself, what would you do? You use both. Because I can create the width and make it really wide and, stereotastic as they used to call it, and then I can make it deep. The deeper you get the sense this way, also then it starts to fold back on itself. And it starts to sound like there's sound behind your head. Just from those two effects. Almost every other effect is some combination of those two. So, let's get out of this part and go into the lesson and see what